In this video, we explore why we believe Anne Boleyn wasn't just a Tudor queen, but a time traveler, a mysterious woman far ahead of her time. Don't forget to subscribe to help us grow our channel. The enduring fascination with Anne Boleyn, a figure synonymous with scandal, ambition, and tragedy, continues to captivate historians and enthusiasts alike. Her brief reign as King Henry VIII's second wife irrevocably shaped England's destiny, marking a period of unprecedented rise and dramatic fall that profoundly impacted the English Reformation and the very nature of the English monarchy. Indeed, she's often cited as the most influential and important queen consort England has ever had. Beyond the established historical facts, Anne Boleyn's unique characteristics are progressive thinking, her defiance of societal norms, and her seemingly prescient understanding of political and religious currents invite a provocative, albeit speculative, question: could she have been a time traveler? This article will delve into the historical record, meticulously examining Anne's unconventional personal traits, pivotal decisions, and complex interactions, to explore how these might be interpreted through the lens of a speculative time travel theory, while remaining firmly rooted in historical context and controversy. The unconventional mind, education, intellect, and personality. Anne Boleyn's formative years and distinctive character provide a compelling foundation for exploring the notion of her being a woman out of time. Her upbringing and subsequent conduct consistently deviated from the norms expected of Tudor noble women, leading to both her meteoric rise and her ultimate downfall. Anne's unique education and exposure to continental thought. Anne's early education, while initially typical for her class in basic skills, such as playing the lute, singing, and dancing, quickly diverged from the standard English aristocratic upbringing. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, a shrewd diplomat, recognized his daughter's intelligence and secured her a place at the sophisticated court of Archduchess Margaret of Austria in the Netherlands at the tender age of 12 or 13. This was a deliberate and significant move, designed to expose her to more progressive and more cultured continental courts. Following nearly 2 years in the Netherlands, and joined the court of Henry VIII's sister, Mary, who was then Queen of France. She spent approximately 8 years abroad, returning to England so graceful that you would never have taken her for an English woman, but for a French woman born, as noted by her biographer Decals. This extensive continental immersion meant she became fluent in French and deeply versed in French culture, art, literature, and courtly etiquette. Her education extended beyond mere courtly graces to include a solid grounding in religion, literacy, and mathematics. She was exposed to renowned composers and authors, and even had the opportunity to observe Leonardo da Vinci during his time at Queen Claude's court. Furthermore, she had access to the vast library at Château de Blois, and was likely part of Marguerite d'Angoulême's intellectual circles, a vibrant hub for Christian humanism and new ideas. This unique intellectual background, particularly her exposure to humanism and nascent reformist ideas from figures like Marguerite of Navarre, provided her with an intellectual depth and a worldview far broader than most English noblewomen of her time. This unique education was, in fact, noted as being instrumental in pressing their king toward England's break with the papacy. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to help us grow our channel. The description of Anne as a French woman born upon her return to England suggests a fundamental difference in her bearing, sophistication, and worldview compared to her English peers. This deep immersion in a more advanced cultural milieu, coupled with her inherent intelligence, gave her a distinct advantage, making her different, charismatic, and highly sensual. This cultural chasm could be interpreted as a temporal advantage, as if she were operating with a more modern sensibility, social grace, and intellectual breadth in a comparatively less refined English court. Her Frenchness became a visible marker of her otherness, which both attracted Henry and alienated others. Her sharp intellect, assertiveness, and defiance of traditional female roles, and was consistently described as highly intelligent and quick-witted, possessing a strength of her mind. She was recognized as intelligent, educated, and stylish beyond the typical English lady. Her personality was notably very strong, and she didn't have any problem at all with getting assertive, even to Henry. This assertiveness was particularly striking to Henry, who was unfamiliar with any form of denial. Crucially, and defied convention by refusing to become Henry's mistress, unlike her sister Mary, and instead insisted on marriage and the crown. This strategic refusal was pivotal in igniting Henry's obsessive desire and pushing him towards the annulment of his first marriage. Her patience and self-control in this 6-year courtship were remarkable, demonstrating a foresight unusual for the time. Furthermore, and was known to continually lecture Henry on politics and religion, a behavior Henry didn't appreciate, as he didn't want advice from his wife. This indicates a proactive engagement in matters typically outside a queen's purview, far beyond merely being an ornament and walking uteruses. She was, in essence, perceived as too ahead of her time. Anne's assertiveness and independent nature, explicitly stated as a result of her time in France, were initially her greatest assets. Her cunning refusal to yield to Henry until marriage was a calculated move that secured her unprecedented rise. However, the same strong personality and willingness to engage in political and religious discourse with the king became a significant liability post-marriage. Henry expected his wife to keep her mouth shut and give birth to lots of sons, and Anne's inability or unwillingness to conform to this expectation, to his growing frustration. She overstepped according to the social mores of the time. If Anne were a time traveler, her modern assertiveness and intellectual engagement might have been a powerful tool for influence and achieving her objectives. However, her inability to fully adapt to or suppress her nature in the face of the deeply ingrained patriarchal power dynamics of the 16th century suggests either a tragic miscalculation of her temporal influence or an inherent difficulty in shedding her true self. This overstepping ultimately contributed to her downfall, highlighting the limitations of even future knowledge against the rigid social and gender norms of the past. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to help us grow our channel. Her distinctive fashion and cultural influence. Anne's return to England marked her as a fashion-forward figure. She famously popularized the French hood, a softer, more modern style compared to the traditional English gable hood worn by Catherine of Aragon. This sartorial choice became a subtle political statement, with Jane Seymour later reverting to the English hood to distance herself from Anne's image. She dazzled at court, excelling in dance, singing, playing instruments, and engaging people in witty conversation. Her majestic allure and impeccable style, homed abroad, significantly helped her attract Henry's attention. Contemporaries reveled in her fashion-forward appearance, and her iconic bee necklace still intrigues viewers today. Her ability to excel them all in behavior, manners, attire, and tongue further underscored her unique presence. While French fashions were indeed popular at the Tudor court, Anne's specific adoption and popularization of the French hood, and her overall fashion-forward appearance, could be seen as more than just following a trend. It was a highly visible manifestation of her distinct continental influence, and, speculatively, a subtle anachronism. The enduring intrigue of her bee necklace suggests a design sensibility that transcended the immediate trends of her era. If Anne were a time traveler, she might unconsciously or consciously introduce elements of her own era's aesthetics, which, while perhaps initially embraced as cutting-edge or stylish, could also subtly set her apart as different. This difference was undeniably part of her allure and charisma, but it also contributed to her being perceived as an outsider, a scandal of Christendom by her detractors, further isolating her in a conservative court. The following table visually highlights the stark differences between Anne's documented characteristics and the expectations for women of her era, providing a clear foundation for the time traveler speculation. It makes the out-of-time aspect more tangible and compelling. A calculated catalyst, the Great Matter, and the English Reformation. Anne Boleyn's role in the English Reformation was not merely coincidental, but profoundly catalytic. Her actions, viewed through a speculative lens, appear to be guided by a deeper understanding of historical trajectories and the levers of power. Don't forget to subscribe to help us grow our channel. Henry VIII's desperate need for a male heir and Anne's strategic refusal. King Henry VIII's primary motivation for the annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon was his desperate need for a legitimate male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty, a concern exacerbated by England's recent history of civil warfare and Catherine had failed to provide this, and Henry became convinced his marriage to his brother's widow was cursed by God, citing a passage from Leviticus. Don't forget to subscribe and help us grow our channel. Anne Boleyn, unlike her sister Mary, shrewdly refused to become Henry's mistress, setting her sights firmly on marriage and the crown. This defiance and cunning ignited Henry's obsessive desire, as he was unaccustomed to denial. Her patience and self-control in this protracted 6-year courtship were truly remarkable. This sustained denial was an unprecedented and highly effective tactic. While historically attributed to her shrewd ambition and determination, this prolonged refusal to consummate the relationship until marriage also aligns perfectly with a time traveler's understanding of historical leverage. Such an individual would have known the immense pressure Henry was under for a legitimate male heir, and the lengths he would go to secure it. Her persistence, calculating, and determined nature in this pursuit suggests a meticulous execution of a pre-known plan, rather than mere opportunistic ambition. If Anne possessed future knowledge, she would have understood precisely the leverage this denial afforded her, not just for marriage, but for fundamentally altering the religious and political landscape of England. Her actions could be interpreted as a deliberate, informed manipulation of Henry's desires to achieve a predetermined historical outcome, making her not just a catalyst, but a conscious architect of the Reformation's initial phase. The political and religious deadlock with Rome. Henry's attempts to secure an annulment from Pope Clement VII were repeatedly unsuccessful, largely because the Pope was effectively a prisoner of Catherine of Aragon's nephew, Emperor Charles V. Following the sack of Rome, this diplomatic impasse forced Henry's hand, leading him to consider more drastic measures to achieve his desired annulment. The failure of Cardinal Wolsey to obtain the annulment led to his downfall, opening the door for new advisors like Thomas Cromwell and Thomas Cranmer, who were more amenable to Henry's radical solutions. The deadlock with Rome was not merely a personal marital issue for Henry, but a profound clash between burgeoning national sovereignty and entrenched papal authority. Henry's great matter became the catalyst for a broader ideological and political shift that had been simmering across Europe for decades. The Pope's political vulnerability only exacerbated the situation, making a break more likely. A time traveler might have possessed knowledge that the break with Rome was historically inevitable, regardless of the specific catalyst. Anne's role, then, would be to ensure she was the catalyst, positioning herself at the epicenter of this monumental shift. Her influence, therefore, would not be about creating the Reformation from scratch, but rather accelerating its onset and shaping its initial trajectory, perhaps to align with a more favorable future timeline she was aware of. Don't forget to subscribe and help us grow our channel. Anne's reformist sympathies and her pivotal role. Anne had hybrid religious opinions, being both reformist, evangelical, and retaining some Catholic beliefs and practices. This fluidity allowed her to navigate the complex religious landscape of the time. She was exposed to reformist ideas during her time in France, particularly through Marguerite of Navarre's intellectual circles. She actively explored new religious ideas, imported prohibited reformist books sometimes covertly, via royal merchants or her brother's diplomatic bags, and notably loved the Tyndale Bible, which she gave to Henry. She was seen as an ally by reformers and influenced Henry to appoint reforming bishops, most significantly being instrumental in the appointment of Thomas Cranmer as Archbishop of Canterbury. She is also said to have alerted Henry to a heretical pamphlet encouraging monarchs to limit the corrupting power of the papacy, potentially bolstering his belief and his own supreme authority over the church. While Anne did not openly identify as Protestant until after the English Reformation, her actions covertly importing prohibited books, actively advocating for reformers, and directly influencing key ecclesiastical appointments demonstrate a deep, sustained, and strategic commitment to religious reform. This goes far beyond mere intellectual curiosity or passive sympathy. It suggests an active manipulation of the religious landscape. Her fluid and flexible religious views point to a pragmatism that allowed her to operate effectively within the shifting religious currents. A time traveler might understand the long-term benefits of a reformed church for England's future development, including economic independence from Rome and the strengthening of national identity. Her nuanced religious stance could be a strategic adaptation, allowing her to navigate the volatile religious currents of the time, while subtly steering Henry towards a predetermined Protestant future. Her actions suggest a deliberate, informed push towards a specific historical outcome, rather than simply reacting to events. Navigating the court, influence, factions, and the seeds of downfall. Anne Boleyn's political engagement and the inherent dangers of her position, a complex interplay of ambition, influence, and vulnerability. Her actions, even if guided by a deeper awareness of history, ultimately encountered insurmountable obstacles within the rigid power structures of the Tudor court. Don't forget to subscribe and help us grow our channel. Anne's significant political influence and patronage. As Queen, Anne Boleyn wielded significant political influence, actively promoting religious reform and acting as a patron to leading reformers. She had direct relationships with key figures like Thomas Cranmer and Hugh Latimer, whose careers she directly impacted. Henry himself acknowledged Cranmer's gratitude to Anne for his position. Her determination, coupled with Henry's, was a driving force that pushed England to the famous break with the Church of Rome. She also played a role in the dissolution of the monasteries, a major aspect of the Reformation. Tudor queens were generally expected to be pious, produce heirs, and maintain courtly grace, not actively engage in political maneuvering or religious policy. Anne's direct involvement in ecclesiastical appointments, her vocal advocacy for reform, and her willingness to lecture Henry on politics and religion were highly unconventional and indicative of a desire for substantive power beyond symbolic queenship. This active political role was a stark contrast to the expected submissiveness of a wife. A time traveler might use their knowledge of future political structures, for example, the rise of parliamentary power, the decline of absolute monarchy, the eventual Protestant identity of England, to attempt to shape the nascent English state. Her proactive political engagement could be an attempt to lay groundwork for future developments, a calculated risk that ultimately backfired due to the deeply entrenched limitations of her era's gender roles and the nature of absolute monarchy. The complex web of court factions and her growing enemies. Anne's meteoric rise inevitably led to her amassing enemies, particularly those from Catherine of Aragon's faction. Her ascension was inextricably linked to the downfall of powerful figures like Cardinal Wolsey and Thomas More. Thomas Cromwell, initially an ally who joined the Boleyn faction to survive Wolsey's fall, later broke ties with the Boleyns and aligned with the Seymours as Anne fell from favour. Cromwell, a powerful proponent of the English Reformation, also made enemies, including Anne, due to his fresh ideas and lack of inherited nobility. He played a prominent role in her downfall. Anne's rapid ascent, her unconventional nature, and her foreign-influenced manners made her an outsider in a court deeply entrenched in tradition, hierarchy, and established power structures. Her lack of traditional royal lineage meant she lacked the inherent protections of a prince's consort, like Catherine of Aragon. This made her inherently vulnerable to the machinations of court factions and the shifting tides of royal favor. Even with future knowledge, a time traveler would struggle against the deeply ingrained social structures, prejudices, and the cutthroat nature of a past era's court. Her overstepping and assertive personality, while effective in gaining power, alienated powerful figures like Cromwell, who ultimately played a prominent role in her downfall, motivated by his own survival in the precarious court environment. This suggests that even a time traveler cannot fully escape the social gravity and inherent dangers of their adopted historical context. Don't forget to subscribe and help us grow our channel.
The immense pressure to produce a male heir and the consequences of her failure's influence and very existence as queen were based solely on two factors: A, that she had Henry on a hook, and B, that she could give him sons. Once B seemed out the window, A disappeared quick as a wink. She failed to produce the desired male heir, giving birth to Elizabeth I instead. Her subsequent miscarriages, including a male fetus after Henry's fall from a horse, heightened the immense pressure and sealed her fate. Don't forget to subscribe and help us grow our channel. Henry's shift in affection to Jane Seymour was directly linked to Anne's failure to produce a son. Jane was perceived as Anne's complete opposite: pious, reserved, virtuous, modest, and seemingly fertile. Despite all her intellectual and political acumen, Anne's ultimate downfall was rooted in a biological reality: her inability to provide Henry with a living male heir. This was the huge part of the reason Henry was desperate to dump Catherine and became the downfall of Anne's promise to Henry. This biological imperative superseded all other considerations for Henry. This highlights a crucial limitation for any speculative time traveler: biological and physiological constraints of the past. Even with perfect knowledge of future events, a time traveler would be bound by the physical realities of their adopted body and the inherent uncertainties of reproduction in a pre-modern era. This suggests that while Anne might have known the political necessity of a male heir, she could not force its outcome, leading to her tragic end. Despite her potential future knowledge, this also underscores the brutal reality of female expendability in a patriarchal society driven by dynastic succession. The tragic end, contrived charges, and enduring Mr. Anne Boleyn's execution remains one of the most dramatic and debated events in English history, shrouded in charges widely considered to be fabricated. The circumstances surrounding her downfall and Henry VIII's role in it continue to fuel historical inquiry. Analysis of the charges widely considered fabricated was arrested in May 1536 on charges of high treason, including adultery, incest with her brother George, and plotting to kill the king. However, most contemporary scholars agree that the charges were contrived and view them as unconvincing. Historian Haley Nolan argues that Anne's lack of privacy and deeply held religious beliefs would have made affairs difficult, and the implausibility of committing adultery just after childbirth is noted. Traditional historical interpretations often relied on biased sources, such as the Spanish ambassador Eustace Chapuis, a staunch supporter of Catherine of Aragon. The widespread historical consensus that the charges against Anne were fabricated reveals a deliberate and ruthless manipulation of truth by the Tudor regime. This was not merely about removing an unwanted queen. It was about publicly justifying her removal and execution to secure Henry's subsequent marriage and maintain the legitimacy of his actions. The charges were designed to be so heinous as to turn public opinion against her and make her death seem inevitable. A time traveler might anticipate such a smear campaign, but the absolute power of the state to control the narrative, even with demonstrably false accusations, underscores the profound difficulty of altering or escaping predetermined historical truths once the machinery of power is set in motion. Don't forget to subscribe and help us grow our channel. The swiftness of her trial and execution suggests a predetermined outcome, regardless of actual guilt, highlighting the limits of even future knowledge against the raw power of a despotic monarch. The political motivations behind her execution and Henry's role. Henry's motivation for Anne's downfall was clear. He was deeply besotted with his own mistress, Jane Seymour, and was, tellingly, betrothed to her. The day after Anne's execution, Jane was seen as the complete opposite to Anne, embodying the meekness and compliance Henry now desired. Anne's actual crimes were merely failing to produce a male heir and refusing to rein in her headstrong personality. Her alleged adultery also cast aspersions on Henry's masculinity, which he sought to counter through public displays of extravagant joy. while Thomas Cromwell played a prominent role in her downfall and was motivated by survival in the shifting court factions. Historians like Susanna Lipscomb and Haley Nolan increasingly argue that Henry himself was pulling the strings. He orchestrated the execution details, choosing a sort of French method for a more dignified end, or perhaps in a selfish act rooted in warped chivalry, casting himself as King Arthur and Anne as Guinevere to justify her death. The historical debate over whether Cromwell or Henry was primarily responsible for Anne's downfall highlights the complex interplay of individual agency and systemic pressures. While Cromwell certainly benefited and facilitated the process, the ultimate decision and orchestration came from Henry. Henry's personal desires for a son, for Jane Seymour, and his desperate need to protect his image and masculinity were paramount and ultimately drove the events. Cromwell, in this view, was an enabler of the king's will rather than the sole instigator. A time traveler might be able to navigate court factions and influence individuals like Cromwell, but confronting the absolute power and personal will of a monarch like Henry VIII, especially when his deepest desires and insecurities are at play, would be an insurmountable challenge. This suggests that even with future knowledge, the gravitational pull of a powerful historical figure's will, particularly one as absolute as Henry's, can override attempts at alteration, leading to an unavoidable, tragic fate. Don't forget to subscribe and help us grow our channel. The shift in Henry's attention had already shifted irrevocably to Jane Seymour by the time of Anne's arrest. Jane represented the ideal Tudor wife, pious, reserved, modest, and seemingly fertile, a stark contrast to Anne's assertive personality. Anne's influence and value to Henry were contingent on her ability to provide him with a son and keep him on a hook. Once these conditions faltered, and a seemingly more suitable alternative, Jane Seymour, appeared, Anne became expendable. Henry's swift move to Jane demonstrates how easily Anne was replaced, not just as a wife, but as the catalyst for his desires. Her unique qualities, once alluring, became liabilities when they no longer served Henry's primary objective. For a time traveler, this signifies the profound risk of their mission. Their unique knowledge and influence might be powerful, but if their primary purpose, for example, providing an heir, initiating a reform, is no longer served or can be fulfilled by another, their value, and thus their life, becomes precarious. This underscores the inherent danger of operating outside one's natural timeline, where one's existence is constantly subject to the whims of the past. Anne Boleyn, was she a historical anomaly or a temporal enigma? Anne Boleyn remains one of history's most compelling and debated figures. Her profound influence on the English Reformation, her role in the dissolution of the monasteries, and her pivotal part in shaping the English monarchy are undeniable historical facts. She possessed a unique blend of intellect, assertiveness, and cultural sophistication that consistently set her apart from her contemporaries. She was a woman who broke the mold of the meek and submissive wife and mother, leaving a lasting legacy as a martyr and heroine of the English Reformation and an inspiration for female autonomy, arguably instilling this attitude in her daughter, Elizabeth I. While there is no definitive historical proof, the speculative theory of Anne Boleyn as a time traveler offers a compelling framework for understanding her seemingly anachronistic traits and decisions. It reframes her unconventional nature not merely as personal eccentricity or extraordinary ambition, but as a potential consequence of knowledge or influence from another era. This lens allows for a deeper appreciation of her unique position in history. Anne Boleyn's story continues to captivate audiences precisely because she was such an anomaly, a woman who consistently defied the norms and expectations of her time. This inherent otherness, her perceived difference, makes her a fertile ground for speculative interpretations, including the idea of her being from another time. Her story resonates because it challenges conventional historical narratives of female agency in the Tudor period. The time travel theory taps into a deeper human fascination with individuals who seem ahead of their time, offering an imaginative explanation for their extraordinary impact. It allows for a more creative and engaging interaction with history, inviting readers to consider how truly extraordinary circumstances might be explained by equally extraordinary origins. Ultimately, Anne Boleyn's story remains a powerful narrative of ambition, power, betrayal, and the profound impact one individual can have on the course of history, regardless of whether she was a temporal anomaly or simply an extraordinary woman born into an extraordinary time. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating stories. Until next time, keep exploring the past.